Today on Alex and Autos, by viewer request, we're taking a look at the 2015 Honda CR-V. This is not a completely new CR-V, instead it's more of a mid-cycle refresh. Honda went to work and they redesigned the nose, tweaked a little bit of the rear end, the interior, and replaced the engine and transmission under the hood. The changes for the 2015 model year improve fuel economy, they improve performance, and they improve refinement in this small crossover vehicle. Just about 20 years ago, the CR-V started its life as a small car-based SUV, and I call that something slightly different than the modern crossover, but we'll go over more of that a little bit later. You'll notice something has now changed on Alex and Autos. We now have this little banner right over here on this side of your screen. That's because we now have a table of contents that allows you to interact with this video, click on a particular section and jump to it. You can jump forward or you can jump backward. Up front, the 2015 model gets a tweaked front end. It looks a little bit more aggressive. We also get the LED daytime running lamp strip that you see right here in the top end touring model that is coupled with a projector halogen low beam headlamp. This is not an HID or a xenon headlamp. The high beam remains a reflector, so it is a little bit different depending on the trim level you get. If you get the base model, we don't have fog lamps, but most of the models you'll see on dealer lots will. Our model has the optional radar adaptive cruise control and the collision mitigating braking system, which is located right here behind this Honda logo. That helps hide it so it's not off to one side or the other on the front of the vehicle. Very much like Acura products, which also get CMBS, this system will attempt to slow you down if it thinks you're going to hit something at almost any vehicle speed. So if you're driving along on the highway and you're driving aggressively in traffic, this system will attempt to intervene to slow you down and reduce the severity of the accident. That's very unique in this particular segment. The compact crossover segment is getting ever more crowded, and as such I'm going to be limiting my comparisons with this vehicle to the RAV4, the Cherokee, the Escape, as well as the Nissan Rogue. Overall, the CR-V is one of the smaller entries in this compact crossover segment at 179.4 inches long. Now obviously at that length this is still significantly larger than things like the Jeep Renegade, the Chevy Trax, or the brand new Honda HR-V. In absolute terms, the Nissan Rogue is not that much larger than this, even though it is a 3-row capable vehicle, has an optional 3rd row. It's only about 4 inches longer or so. I said earlier that the CR-V is slowly becoming a crossover rather than a car-based SUV. That's really obvious when you compare the ground clearance between this and the first generation CR-V in the US about 20 years ago. We have 6.4 inches of ground clearance in the front-wheel drive model and 6.8 inches of ground clearance in this all-wheel drive model. That's not necessarily that unusual because it is very similar in terms of ground clearance to the RAV4 as well as the Nissan Rogue and most of those other very crossover-like entries in this segment. Ford's Escape has a little bit less ground clearance in this generation than the last, but it still beats this at 7.9 inches, and the Cherokee with an off-road mission comes in at 8.7. In addition to the ground clearance, you'll notice that we no longer have the same dedication to approach and departure angles up front or in the rear as we had in that first generation CR-V. Not having the same dedication to approach and departure angles is obviously bad for off-roading, but it's very good for interior accommodations. You'll notice that the cargo area goes an awful lot lower than you'll find in the Jeep Cherokee, which has an off-road mission. And that's why we get about 33% more storage space behind the second row seats in this vehicle than we do in that Jeep. The rear hasn't changed too much from the 2014 model year, which means we still get this relatively vertical rear hatch, which helps improve cargo practicality. And that cargo hatch is also relatively tall. So you'll notice the opening goes quite far to the ground when you compare this again with that Jeep Cherokee. I mentioned earlier that the cargo load floor is quite low to the ground. That's important because it allows the CR-V to swallow larger items than you will in some of those more off-road capable vehicles. You'll notice that right here with this 24-inch roller bag. If I roll up this tonneau cover, you'll notice that this 24-inch roller bag actually fits completely under the tonneau cover in this vertical position. It means it's an awful lot easier to fit larger, bulkier items and still have them hidden from view. Well, I can't do that with this 26-inch roller bag. I can stack the 24-inch roller bag right on top of that and still close this tonneau cover. There's very little real-world compromise for this added cargo practicality. You'll notice that we have a very vertical area right here under the tonneau cover. It only slants slightly above it. If you get the power rear tailgate, it does occupy a little bit of room right over here on this side, but we still have a spare tire under the cargo load floor. On the downsides, rearward visibility takes a little bit of a decrease because of these small rear windows, and the second row seats, although they do fold flat with themselves, they do not fold flat with the cargo load floor because the load floor is dropped as far down as it possibly can go. Overall, the CR-V scores 9 out of 10 points when it comes to my exclusive trunk comfort index. This is a very large and very accommodating cargo area. It also is finished quite nicely. I do have to dock at least 1 point, however, for this power tailgate module, which does interfere with the cargo loading, as well as these small rear windows, which do interfere with rearward visibility. If you plan on being one of the few people that tow with your compact crossover vehicle, you may be disappointed that the CR-V has the same towing rating as the vast majority of the entries in this segment at 1,500 pounds. If you need a compact crossover and you still want to tow, your only real option is the Jeep Cherokee at 4,500 pounds. Some of the other American options will tow a little bit more than this, but most of the compact crossovers are right here at 1,500 pounds. Instead of a two-engine lineup, the CR-V has only one engine available. It's a brand new 2.4-liter four-cylinder engine that's very similar to what you'll find in the Honda Accord. It produces 185 horsepower and 181 pound-feet of torque. That may not sound too different than the outgoing engine, however, this has a much lower torque curve. In addition to the torque starting lower in the RPM band, this Earth Dreams engine from Honda also employs direct injection to get the best fuel economy. Also improving fuel economy is a somewhat unique design that has caused a few customer complaints about vibration. It's a cylinder offset. Now, in most engines, you'll refer to this graphic that I'm going to pop right in front of my face here. The crankshaft and the cylinders are right on top of one another, and that's not going on in this engine. This engine, the cylinders have actually been shifted off to the side by 8 millimeters. That improves efficiency, but it does cause a slight low-speed vibration at times. Honda has said they have canceled out the majority of those vibrations with balance shafts and other technologies in this engine, but it is still noticeable at certain RPMs. To help this vehicle average nearly 30 miles per gallon, Honda pairs this engine with a CVT that is very similar to what you'll find in the Honda Accord yet again. It gives this 27 miles per gallon city, 34 highway, and 29 combined in front-wheel drive versions, and 26, 33, 28 with all-wheel drive. We should now talk about all-wheel drive systems, because I've received a number of questions and perhaps complaints over at facebook.com/AlexandAutos about the all-wheel drive system in the 2015 CR-V. It very famously failed a Swedish all-wheel drive test. Now, that all-wheel drive test puts the front wheels on rollers and the rear wheels are on tarmac, and then the whole vehicle is set at an incline. The test in theory is designed to find out whether the vehicle can send all of the engine's available power to the rear axle. Unlike certain other vehicles in this segment, the CR-V failed. It did not move off of those rollers. However, I actually have a problem with that test because unless you're living in a roller factory, you're never going to really be in a situation where the front wheels have 0 traction and the rear wheels have 100% traction. It's just not that common of an occurrence. Because this is not a very common occurrence, Honda has actually specifically programmed the software of this vehicle to not damage or overheat its rear differential unit if that situation is called upon. And that's why this vehicle failed it. That's also why the 2014 vehicle failed at first and then passed after a simple software update. It really has nothing to do with the mechanicals of the car, it's all about the software. And Honda has chosen to have this software err on the side of protecting its hardware components, specifically the rear drive unit, rather than damaging them trying to get out of a roller test. You may think that's good, you may think that's bad, but the all-wheel drive system does actually work in the CR-V. It does exactly what it's designed to do. This is not designed to be a rugged off-road crawling all-wheel drive system like you'll find on that Cherokee, and that's why I'm including it in this comparison, because the Cherokee is the only entry in this segment that can firmly lock that center coupling, that has a locking rear differential, a low-range gear set, and is truly designed to send 100% of the power to the rear axle when it needs to. Under normal circumstances like this gravelly parking lot that we're on right here, if you floor this vehicle, all 4 tires will spin because this will engage the center coupling, but in that circumstance, only 50% of the power is going to the rear. It's being spread approximately equal front to rear and side to side. Front seat comfort comes in at 9 out of 10 points. I found the front seats in the Cherokee, and that would be the top-end Cherokee, to be a little bit more comfortable than this, but this is above the vast majority of vehicles, regardless of whether you get the LX model, it's the base model, or this top-end touring model. We have a tilt telescopic steering column with a decent range of motion. One thing to keep in mind, however, is that we have somewhat limited legroom compared with some of the competition. This front seat is all the way back in its tracks at this moment. I only sit about an inch further forward than that, and I'm 6 feet tall. Even so, headroom is generous. I have about 2 inches of headroom here, even though I like to sit in a more upright position. Regardless of which trim level you get, you do not get a power passenger seat in the CR-V. That is one thing to keep in mind. It does mean that the passenger seat is a little bit less comfortable than the driver's. Moving to the back seats, we again get 9 out of 10 points. This slots in 1 step below the Jeep Cherokee. Now, if you have kids, however, you may find this a 10 out of 10 vehicle, not 9 out of 10 points, because the seat bottom cushion is a little bit closer to the floor than in the Cherokee, making it more comfortable for children, a little bit less comfortable for adults. Unlike some of those other vehicles in this segment, we do not have reclining or forward and rearward sliding second row seats. We do, however, have very generous legroom and headroom figures. I have about 3 inches of legroom left sitting right here behind myself, and about 2 inches of headroom even though we're in the sunroof equipped model. If I scoot on over to the right side of the vehicle, this front seat was adjusted for a 6'5" passenger. I still have about 1.5 inches of room left. Now again, keep in mind these front seats don't move as far rearward as you'll find in some of the competition. That's part of why I have a little bit more legroom right over here on the right. The rear seats fold in a 60-40 folding fashion. The seat bottom cushion goes forward, and you'll notice that I don't have to pull an additional lever in order to move this seat back into the downward position. It automatically unlatches when I move that seat bottom cushion. Now you can do that from the back, or you can do it from the front. In the center of the rear bench, we have a softly padded center armrest with 2 fixed cup holders there. They are quite large and easy to use. You will notice that the shoulder belt for the center passenger comes out of the ceiling rather than out of the seat. That, strangely enough, doesn't cause a problem with child seats in the CR-V as it normally does in other vehicles, because we actually have 3 sets of latch anchors back here rather than just 2. Only 2 latch anchors are federally required, but the CR-V gives us one right here for the middle seat, which makes it easier to install a child seat in the center of the CR-V. It also means that it's not going to be skewed off to one side with this lap and shoulder belt. As always, if you want to know more about how child seats fit inside this vehicle, you can go ahead and click that banner on the side of your screen and jump on over to that video. Because of the design of the CR-V, we don't have any hump right here in the center, and that means that if I sit down in this center seat, I still have about 1.5 inches of headroom, again, even though we are in the model with the sunroof. Moving to the front, we have height adjustable seat belts for the driver and the front passenger, and 2-way adjustable headrests, and our particular model has leather upholstery. The interior style of the CR-V is very much a cross between the Civic and the Accord in many respects. The front door panels definitely combine these two styles, and you'll find more hard plastics than you will in the Accord, but less than you would in the Civic. We have a soft touch armrest right here, soft touch panel in this portion of the door. The upper portion of the door is a hard plastic. The bottom portion of the door is also hard plastic. We have a bottle holder and a cubby right there. And then this little section right here under the window switch is also an additional storage cubby. Moving over to the dashboard, we have hard touch plastics up top. Those are a little bit easier to clean, a little bit more durable than soft touch plastics. Doesn't have quite the same feel, however. You'll find a bit more soft touch plastic in some of those competitors out there. Soft touch plastics right down here lower in the dashboard, faux wood trim, hard touch plastics below that. We have a moderately sized glove compartment right down here on the passenger side. I wasn't able to fit too many large items in there. Definitely couldn't fit a tablet computer inside. Moving over to the center of the dashboard, we have this 7-inch touchscreen LCD infotainment system on our particular model. If you want to know more about Honda's latest touchscreen infotainment system, go ahead and click that banner at the bottom of your screen. You'll be taken on over to my latest video on that. This is very similar to what you find in the current generation Honda Civic, with a few exceptions. We have physical buttons right over here on the left rather than touch buttons. So whereas the Civic had touch buttons on a glass surface, this is a little bit different from that. We have the same sort of functionality going on with Honda's Link Connect system, that's smartphone integration. We also have Bluetooth phone interface, built-in navigation available as an option, and we have our usual audio interfaces, XM satellite radio, AM, FM, iPod, USB interface, and have twin USB interfaces, HDMI input, AHA streaming radio, etc. A little bit different from the Civic system is that we do have an optical disc player that is behind the screen. You can see right there, we just click that button, pop in your optical disc, press the same button to close the system right there. Like many Honda models, we have a 2-screen setup, so we have this smaller screen right there above that infotainment screen. That's controlled via some buttons on the steering wheel. We can cycle through a few displays, including a clock, your infotainment options, fuel economy, and then a blank screen that you can also get a clock on. Zooming out from there, you can see that the flowing theme continues from the passenger side with this faux wood trim that runs across right down there below the 2-zone climate control that our particular model has. Soft touch plastics going on right here around that, hard touch plastics lower in the dashboard. Below that we have a shifter that's not quite in the dashboard and not quite in the center console either. You can see if I put it in reverse, we do have a backup camera right there. We also have drive, sport, and low modes in this transmission. There's no manual mode. We do have a CVT, of course. To the left of all this, we have the engine start-stop button. Practicality is very important in the small crossover vehicles, so we do have an awful lot going on right here in the center console. 12-volt power outlet right here, seat heating buttons for the driver and the front passenger, and then we have 2 very large cup holders that are adjustable. We have a large and softly padded center armrest, and if we open this up, you'll notice a big change for the 2015 model year vehicle. We have a power outlet right in here. We also have 2 USB ports hidden away inside the center console, and this HDMI port right over here on the side. If you want to use the Honda Link Connect infotainment system with your iPhone or other smartphone device, you will have to use the USB cable and one HDMI input in order to send the generated video on over to the system. This does not support Apple CarPlay or Google's similar system yet. This is a relatively deep storage cubby. It goes quite a great distance down there. We're taking a look at the instrument cluster from the side first so you can really see the 3D quality that's going on here. We have a center-mounted speedometer, a tachometer on the left, and some additional gauges on the right, but it's all tiered as you can see right there. So the speedometer needle actually comes out of that ring in the center and then floats among the numbers right here. We have kilometers an hour on the inside and then a very small multifunction display inside that. Taking a head-on look at these gauges, you'll notice that they are very similar to what you'll find in the current generation Honda Accord, which I think is a very attractive look. That large center speedometer, again, is actually flanked by these two strips right here. You can see them in white right now. They do change color, so they will turn green if you're driving in an economical fashion, and the less economical you're driving, the whiter they will become. So they do range from a strong green to a strong white. The very small multifunction display is controlled via these two buttons right down here on the steering wheel. It's a fairly basic display. We get average fuel economy, instant fuel economy, certain vehicle settings, oil life, average speed, and elapsed time. This display will also give you cruise control functionality if we have the radar cruise control engaged. As you can see now, we have the adaptive cruise control, lane keep assist engaged. I can press the button for lane keep assist and lane departure warning, and it'll show you those lane lines right there and tell you whether or not the system is actually recognizing a lane line. If the cruise control was engaged, it would also show you a picture of a vehicle if it detected a vehicle in front of you, as well as your set speed. Moving out to the steering wheel, we have a 3-spoke steering wheel design that is somewhat similar to the Civic and again somewhat similar to the Honda Accord. We have our voice command button and phone buttons right over here, dedicated phone hang-up and pickup buttons. This button changes the multi-information display that's right over there above the infotainment screen. That cycles through your screens right there. We also have a menu button that again uses that screen right there in the center of the dashboard. Track forward, backward, source, and volume up-down buttons. On this side we have the controls I showed you earlier to control that multi-information display right in the center of the speedometer, and we have our cruise control buttons right over here. Since our model has the radar adaptive cruise control as well as the lane keeping assistant, we have these two additional buttons right over here. This one changes the distance that the vehicle is following the car in front of you, and this one enables and disables the lane keeping assistance system. The biggest change for the 2015 model year really is this engine and transmission combination, because it makes the CR-V more drivable than it was before. Although it seems like the power figures haven't changed that much from the outgoing model, the torque comes on much lower, and this CVT really makes the most of this engine. I've long been a fan of CVTs because they solve a number of problems that vehicles have, especially with smaller engines. With the old CR-V, if you were hill climbing and the hill was steep, then you'd find yourself upshifting and downshifting frequently. That doesn't happen in this vehicle because the transmission just picks the best ratio for the situation and sticks with it. CVTs can also keep the engine at an optimum RPM band and then vary the ratio around it. So as you accelerate, it can keep the engine at a particular RPM band that's most efficient for your acceleration. Honda's CVT, like most of the other CVTs out there, does not have a terribly low starting ratio. That's really evident when you take a look at the 0 to 30 time. However, when you take a look at the 0 to 60 time, this vehicle does very well in this segment at 7.8 seconds 0 to 60. That's all down to the CVT and its ability to keep the engine at its optimum power band. With that 0 to 60 time, the CR-V beats every other naturally aspirated 4-cylinder entry in this segment. The only things that will be faster than this will be a turbocharged Escape, a V6 Cherokee, or some of those V6 powered options from General Motors. Braking in the CR-V was very confident. I'll give this 8 out of 10 points. Distances were a little bit longer than I would like, but fade resistance was very good. The 2015 model year improves cabin noise in the CR-V, but cabin noise is something that Honda has long struggled with, and the CR-V is no different in that respect. I measured 72.5 decibels in this CR-V at 50 miles an hour, which makes this one of the louder entries in this segment. However, you should keep in mind that this is definitely quieter than your average compact sedan. So something like a Honda Civic is actually going to be a little bit louder than this, but something like a Honda Accord is definitely going to be quieter. The ride is relatively firm in the CR-V, but it's not harsh. I'll give this 8 out of 10 points when it comes to the ride. In terms of handling, I'm going to give this 8 out of 10 points as well. This doesn't handle as well as a Mazda CX-5, but it does handle very well for this segment. Certain versions of the Ford Escape handle a little bit better than this, but this definitely handles better than the Foresters or the Cherokees in this segment. This also handles better than its closest rival, which would be the Toyota RAV4. The RAV4 and the CR-V have long been tough competitors in this segment, but I think the CR-V really surpasses the RAV4 in almost every way out there. The RAV4 does have a little bit more room in the back in terms of cargo room, but in pretty much every other area the CR-V scores higher. Honda's CVT, or continuously variable transmission, has had a huge impact on the way the CR-V drives. Very much like the Honda Accord, this transmission can shift its ratios from high to low or low to high much faster than the other CVTs that you'll find out on the market. That includes the CVTs from Nissan or from Subaru. It's most obvious when we're getting on a freeway like this, because right now the engine's spinning around 1,000 RPM. We're going about 30 miles an hour around this cloverleaf. But if I were to floor the vehicle right here at the end of this ramp, it will immediately go to about 4,500 RPM, and then the engine RPMs will rise as we accelerate. As I continue to hold down the pedal, the engine will hang out there at nearly 7,000 RPM to give us the maximum acceleration that we're requiring. Now that we're on the freeway, this is a good place to talk about the safety systems that Honda is making available in this touring model that we're driving right here. We have lane departure warning, lane keep assist, as well as a radar cruise control system. The systems in the CR-V are very similar to what you'll find in the Acura MDX, the Acura RLX, and the Acura TLX. They perform very much the same out on the road. This is not a full speed range radar cruise control system, so it won't go down below about 15 or 20 miles an hour or so. It will tell you that you need to put your foot on the brakes yourself. Right now we have the cruise control set to 72 miles an hour. We're here on Interstate 280 in California. The vehicle has seen the car in front of us and it will gradually slow down. Now, very much like those Acura systems, the system doesn't respond quite as well to manual input on the accelerator pedal. So right now, the system has decided that I need to be this distance away from the car in front of me. That's the distance the car is automatically driving. If I want to get closer and I press on the accelerator pedal, it will let me get closer. But if I let off the accelerator pedal, the car will drop down below what you would normally expect the speed should be, like that, and now it will start picking up again and close that gap to what it was. That's not the way all systems behave. Systems from other manufacturers out there will attempt to keep that distance a little more closely. The lane departure warning system operates like most lane departure warning systems out there on the market. It beeps at you if you cross over your lane line. The lane keep assist system is relatively aggressive in this vehicle, very much like the Acuras in which it's also located in. So if I take my hands off the steering wheel, no hands on the steering wheel, this car will actually sort of ping-pong itself around the lane line. This does an awful lot better than the Infiniti or Nissan systems because the effect of the steering is more gradual. So it applies more steering effort the closer it gets to the lane line. Right now the car has sensed that my hands are no longer on the steering wheel. It's telling me to put my hands back on the wheel. But the system is good enough that it will actually drive this car for a decent portion as long as the road is only curving gently. Lane keep assist systems can take a little bit of getting used to because sometimes it may feel like the car is fighting you while you're driving. It's very easy to enable or disable. There's a button right here on the steering wheel, so if you're driving along a highway like this and you want the lane keep assist system, but then you get on your favorite winding mountain road and you want to cut those corners a little bit more closely, you can just disable it right there on the steering wheel and it will stop bugging you. The open highway is a great place to talk about fuel economy. The CR-V has been averaging 26.9 miles per gallon over a week of very mixed driving. That's one of the best fuel economy figures in this segment. I'm going to give the CR-V 9 out of 10 points because we don't have any hybrid entries in this segment anymore. The Ford Escape no longer has a hybrid entry. In fact, if you want a hybrid crossover, the least expensive one you can get really is that Lexus NX hybrid. Subaru does have a hybrid version of one of their vehicles. However, it's a very, very mild hybrid and it doesn't really have that great of an impact on fuel economy. I would actually rank that below this in terms of fuel economy. As usual, Honda makes pricing very easy with 4 trim levels, 2 drivetrain options, front-wheel drive or all-wheel drive, and very few standalone options. Things start out with the LX at $23,445. That is relatively well equipped for a base vehicle. That's part of why it's a little bit more expensive than you'll find some of the competition. If you want to add all-wheel drive, that will set you back $1,250. But regardless of which wheels are doing the powering of the vehicle, you still get that standard CVT, Bluetooth, Pandora integration, cruise control, and steel wheels. I think that the $25,545 EX model and the EXL model are probably the best deals for the CR-V. The EX model starts out with a 7-inch standard LCD infotainment system. You can optionally get navigation through your iPhone and that downloadable app for $60. You get the power driver's seat, you get a backup camera, keyless go, and a bunch of other standard features that you don't get in the LX, even though this is only about a $2,000 bump. The EXL takes things up to the next bump for $28,145, and you can optionally add built-in navigation to that same 7-inch display for $1,500. Yet again, in any of these versions that use that 7-inch display, you can download the app, connect it with your smartphone, and of course navigate that way. We also get some additional options like 2-zone climate control, standard leather, as well as an updated sound system. The top of the line touring model that we're taking a look at here will set you back $31,645 for the front wheel drive model. Again, you can add all-wheel drive for $1,250. This brings standard adaptive cruise control, the collision mitigating braking system, lane departure warning, lane keep assistance, as well as the projector low beam headlamps. When it comes to value, the CR-V does best in the EX model, in my opinion, second best in the EXL. The EX model gives you a great deal of standard equipment and not that much of a price bump over the base LX. When shopping for a CR-V, that is really important to keep in mind because the base LX model is a little bit more expensive than a number of the competition. Toyota's RAV4 comes in very similarly priced at $23,680, but I think it's my least liked of the major sellers in this segment. I didn't find the RAV4 seats terribly comfortable. The interior is definitely a notch below this vehicle, and even though it wasn't refreshed that long ago, it definitely feels a little bit old. Ford's Escape at $22,960 has a very aggressive low-end price. However, when you similarly equip it to this vehicle, it comes in right about the same. I do like that Ford Escape's interior, and I really like the My Ford Touch infotainment system, even though a number of people don't. Ford does have more engine options available, but you will pay for those engine options. It is very easy to get carried away with the options and the features on that Ford Escape, so it's very easy to get that price tag much higher than this. Especially in the EX and EXL trims, I think the CR-V is a better value than the Escape, and that's even before we take into account the higher resale value and better typical reliability. As I've said in the past, Nissan's Rogue at $22,790 is one of my favorite vehicles in this segment. It has an incredibly low base price, it has an incredible value proposition all across the line. Similarly equipped, it comes in a decent amount less than the CR-V. Although I didn't find the Rogue's interior quite as nice or the seats quite as comfortable as the CR-V, that value proposition is hard to deny. I also really like the Rogue because it is available in a 7-passenger version. It has that optional third row, and even though that third row is very cramped, it's very practical. Of course, if you're using the third row, you have practically no cargo room behind that third row. It's really that emergency third row for when you have 2 extra people visiting your family of 4 and you still need to be able to go out to dinner or out to a movie. The Rogue has typically been a little bit less reliable than the CR-V. It's also slower to 60, even though we also get a CVT under that hood, and we didn't get quite as good a mileage in that Rogue as we did in this vehicle. Jeep's Cherokee at $22,945 is probably the trickiest competitor in this segment to talk about, even though I have been talking about it a great deal. That's because the Cherokee really is still trying to be the trucklet in this segment. The Cherokee has the highest ground clearance, it's the only one with available locking rear differentials, it's the only one with a terrain management system or a low-range gear set. All that comes at a cost, however. The Cherokee gets lower fuel economy than this, notably. It's also very heavy and it doesn't handle quite as well. There are other compromises at work in that Cherokee as well. We get much less cargo room in the back because we still have a dedication to approach, departure, and breakover angles in the vehicle. That means that we get less room on the inside in many respects, even though it's about the same size on the outside. The 2015 CR-V has brought a serious dedication to interior refinement into the CR-V. We still have a lot of hard plastics up higher on the dashboard that I noted earlier, but the majority of the face of the dashboard is definitely now a soft touch plastic that looks a little bit more luxurious. The seats are definitely comfortable, the driving position is comfortable, you can get things like radar cruise control and that collision mitigating braking system, as well as the basically Acura lane keeping assistance system brought down to the Honda lineup. The CR-V is just one of those crossovers that's very, very easy to live with. My top 3 picks in this segment would be the CR-V, the Rogue, and the Jeep Cherokee. As I usually do, however, I'm using multiple vehicles in the same sentence, even though they're after very different things. The Rogue is definitely the value entry in this segment. I think it's also the practicality winner with that available third row option. If you're not looking at that third row, the CR-V is probably the best all-around vehicle. The Jeep Cherokee is a very different kind of crossover in this segment. It's obviously the best off-road. It's probably the more fun if you live out in the country and you do need that off-road ability. However, as an in-city crossover vehicle where passenger accommodations, cargo accommodations, etc. are of the utmost importance, the Cherokee does not score as high as the CR-V. That brings me back around to the CR-V's changing mission over the last 20 years in America. The crossover segment was very, very young in 1995, and a mini trucklet is exactly what the market needed. At this time, however, the CR-V really is where the market is located. People want the storage space, they want the practicality, they want the cargo accommodations, they want the comfort, they want the style of a crossover vehicle, but they really want more car-like handling and more car-like fuel economy. That's exactly what the CR-V delivers. Thanks for taking the time to check out this video. Again, I'm Alex Dykes, and this has been the 2015 Honda CR-V Touring. Go ahead and click that subscribe banner at the bottom of your screen so you can be updated on all of my latest videos. You can also find me over at facebook.com/AlexNautos, over at Twitter as AlexNautos, and I'll see you next week.